Frederic Leclerc was traveling with two of his colleagues, a journalist from BFM TV and a Ukrainian fixer translator. The other journalist he was with was wounded in the leg. Actually, the fixer was okay. According to someone from BFM TV, one of the editors-in-chief, they had absolutely discussed clearly this mission beforehand, evaluated the risks. I'm told also that there was a Ukrainian journalist who was thinking of going on this humanitarian convoy, but who had actually, as it were, given up his place to the French journalists who very much wanted to cover the evacuation of civilians from Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, these two cities in Luhansk Oblast, which are under sustained and intense attack now from the Russian forces. The governor of the region, Sergei Haidai, did say that they had advised the French journalists not to go and told them that it was dangerous, but they are by no means the only journalists who have gone to those places in recent days. But it clearly is an extremely dangerous place to be, not least because Russian forces are shelling the roads that lead from the rest of Ukraine to Severodonetsk and Luhansk in a bid to try to cut off Ukrainian supply chains.
And Gulliver, on the same day, the French foreign minister is there in Ukraine as well, unrelated to that tragic death. She's been visiting the town of Bucha. I'm just wondering, what do Ukrainian officials have to say about her visit?
Well, I mean, first of all, I should probably mention that Catherine Colonna, the French foreign minister, although, of course, her visit was not planned to coincide with this tragic death of a French journalist. Naturally, she very quickly reacted to it and demanded a full and thorough investigation. And she also said that this tragedy is a crime because it was a humanitarian convoy that was apparently fired upon. In an off-the-record briefing with French journalists, she responded to a question about whether or not one could be sure that it was definitely the Russians who fired on it. She said that it seemed extremely unlikely that it would be the Ukrainians. They wouldn't fire on their own humanitarian convoy, and she really seemed to think that this would be an extremely unlikely hypothesis, though she did say, of course, the investigation will show, and she called for a full and thorough investigation. Prior to that, she had been in Bucha and Irpin. In Bucha, she said, this is something that should not have happened, talking about the massacres of civilians that there were in Bucha and other areas in Kiev region, and should not happen again. And that set some Ukrainians commenting that it is quite likely that it is happening at the moment in the areas of Ukraine that are currently occupied by Russian forces. We can't be sure, of course. We don't have evidence. Areas of Kharkiv region that have recently been liberated by Ukrainian troops, people coming from there don't seem to be talking about the same kinds of large-scale killings by Russian soldiers as there were in Bucha and Irpin. But stories coming out of occupied areas in the south of Ukraine, Kherson region, Zaporizhia region, do suggest that there are Russian soldiers taking it out on civilians, particularly those who have a pro-Ukrainian position. And so Ukrainians very much want Western politicians to realize that the reason why it's so urgent to give Ukraine support, to give Ukraine the weapons that Ukraine is demanding for, is precisely because it is necessary to avoid things like what happened in Bucha happening again in the areas of Ukraine that Russia currently occupied. So they're hoping, that she understands that. Catherine Colonna did also, although she didn't confirm it explicitly, she very strongly hinted that France would be supplying more weapons to Ukraine. France has already supplied some weapons, but unlike the United States and the United Kingdom, the French tend to prefer to be more discreet about it, perhaps also because of the fact that weapons on their way to the front lines may well be targeted by Russian troops. So the French prefer not to announce these things in advance, but they have already provided howitzers, mobile self-propelled howitzers of the type Caesar, which the Ukrainian armed forces confirmed yesterday. No doubt, also thinking about the timing of Catherine Colonna's visit, have already successfully destroyed at least 2 Russian tanks, 2 armored personnel carriers, and 1 truck that was carrying ammunition.